The Galactic Council couldn't understand why every alien feared humanity. The summons had no subject line, just a timestamp, a chamber number, and 7 official seals pressed into the notification header, like a formal threat wearing diplomatic clothing. 300 station time. No explanation, no context, just be there. I was already awake when it arrived. 3 years on relay station. Oren had cured me of sleeping past 2. The station hummed at a frequency that was not quite sound, and not quite vibration. It was something in between that got into your molars and stayed there. You adapted or you transferred. I had adapted. I showed up in yesterday's clothes, with a thermos of coffee that had been sitting on the burner since noon. It smelled like someone had made a threat to coffee, and then followed through on it. I drank it anyway. I had been a trauma nurse for 6 years before I had been a diplomat. I had a high tolerance for things that should have been abandoned. The council chamber was built for exactly the kind of meeting they were about to have with me. High ceilings, 7 tiers of curved seating arranged in a perfect semicircle, each tier occupied by a different species and their respective support staff. The lighting was calibrated to be comfortable for all attending species simultaneously, which meant it was slightly wrong for all of them. Pale gold, slightly too warm for human eyes, slightly too dim for Voy, slightly too uniform for the faceted vision of the Dreth. Nobody had ever accused the Galactic Council of making anyone feel at home. I took the single seat at the center of the floor. It was a human chair. They had one brought in which I noticed. They had known I was coming long enough to arrange furniture. That was information. Councillor VTH spoke first. He always did. In my 3 years of diplomatic rotations, I had never once seen VTH let another councillor open a session. He was the oldest living Sathani on record, which meant he had been studying the behavior of civilizations since before my planet had figured out writing. He had 8 limbs, 3 of which he used to gesture when he spoke, giving the impression that his entire body was arguing with itself in a language that predated language. He said in the careful measured cadence that translation software rendered as smooth and almost warm. Delegate Voss, thank you for attending on short notice. Of course, I said, we have questions. I figured one of his secondary limbs moved. I had learned by that point that this was the Sethani equivalent of clearing your throat, a preparatory gesture. Something significant was incoming. Humanity, he said, presents an anomalous threat classification. We require clarification. I sipped my terrible coffee. He put the file. They put it on the main display, which was sized for a room that held 7 species and was therefore from my seat, approximately the size of a house. Humanity's complete Xeno-diplomacy dossier rendered in holographic type across 15 meters of air. I had never seen my own species file before. It was not a comfortable experience. The data was organized by category. Biological metrics. First, lifespan, embarrassingly short physical resilience. Below the council average for 7 of 11 standard benchmarks. No biological enhancements on record. No psionic capability. No hive mind redundancy. Propulsion technology, mid-tier weapon systems, functional, not exceptional. Population spread limited, relatively speaking, to 43 colonized systems after 200 years of spacefaring. By every measurable standard, we were mid. Then Councillor Veth scrolled to the last section. Threat classification. Undefined. Do not escalate. I read that twice. Undefined was not a category they used for species that scared them. I knew the Council's classification system. Threatening species. Got tiered rankings. Tier 1 through 6 calibrated by capability, temperament, and resource competition. The Vokai clans were Tier 3. The Pale Architects, ancient and vast and operating on timelines that made the Council nervous, were Tier 2. Undefined was the category they used when the classification system itself broke down when a species did not fit inside the framework that the framework was built to contain. We have conducted 3 independent assessments, Veth said, across 7 years of observation. All 3 returned the same classification. Our analysts describe your species as, and I translate directly, a variable we cannot assign a value to. The chamber was very quiet. The Vakai warrior clans, Veth continued, who have not filed a formal fear assessment in 400 years, submitted one regarding humanity 18 months ago. The Dreth Collective, which processes all data through consensus logic, returned a non-consensus result for the first time in recorded history when asked to evaluate humanity's trajectory. The Pale Architects, who have observed the rise and fall of 62 civilizations, requested through channels they have not used in 2 centuries, that humanity be discussed at formal council level before any further contact escalation. He let that land. I let it land with him. The Pale architects had not asked the council for anything in 200 years. They did not ask. They observed. They were the kind of ancient that made asking feel quaint, and they had broken 2 centuries of silence to make sure humanity was on the agenda. I set down my thermos. What exactly, I said, did you think we were going to do? The silence in the chamber had a texture to it. The kind of silence that happens when a question lands in a room and nobody is certain whether it is the beginning of an answer or a different kind of problem entirely. VT's secondary limbs went still. That, he said quietly, is precisely what we are trying to determine. I looked at the file on the wall. My species reduced to metrics and classifications and an empty field where a threat value should have been. I thought, we have not even tried yet. I thought. Bless their hearts. All right, I said. Walk me through what you have. I will tell you what I can. They had 17 documented incidents. Vita presented them in chronological order, which I appreciated. It meant he was trying to understand them, not build a case. There is a difference between those two approaches that most people, human or otherwise, never learn to recognize. Vita was 8,000 years old and had learned it a long time ago. I listened to the first 3 incidents with my hands wrapped around my cold thermos and my face arranged into the expression I had developed over 6 years of trauma nursing. The one that says, I am taking this seriously without falling apart. It is a useful expression. I wore it every day in this job. The first incident was the Kepler 44 to be blockade. Beth described it in the precise, neutrally phrased language of council documentation. A human colony of 4,000 settlers established on Kepler 44 to be a Quetzalcoatl Mocha. A Kepler full to be a territorial dispute between the Vokai clans and the Sitani expanse had resulted in all supply lines to the colony being severed as a strategic pressure tactic. Neither party had targeted the colonists directly. They had simply become, in the language of the report, collateral resource casualties. VOI probability models at the time had calculated extinction of the colony within 4 months. The math was not subtle. 4,000 humans sealed in with what they had on hand, on a planet that had not yet reached agricultural self-sufficiency. I already knew what happened next. I had studied the Kepler case in my 3rd year of xenodiplomacy training, but I listened to VTH describe it, and I watched his 3 active limbs move very carefully, and I understood that what he was really asking was not what happened. He was asking me why. 19 months later, all 4,000 colonists were alive. They had rationed existing food stores with a precision that the Valkyrie, reviewing the records afterward, described as irrational discipline. They had stripped and processed every non-essential synthetic material in the colony for nutritional conversion. They had developed 7 new protein synthesis methods, 2 of which were later adopted as standard emergency protocol across 12 council species. And somewhere around month 8, according to recovered communications, they had held a cooking competition. The challenge category was most edible thing made from materials, technically not intended to be eaten. I did not tell VTH this last part immediately. I let him finish the clinical summary. Colonies survived. Supply lines restored. Colonists required 6 weeks of supplementary nutrition post-blockade and then returned to standard operational status. Returned to standard operational status. I repeated. Correct. In 6 weeks. Correct. I nodded slowly. They adapted. The Vai representative on the council, a large angular creature named Ketva, who had the kind of stillness that things at the top of a food chain develop over generations, made a sound that my translation chip rendered as a low and sustained note. It was, I had learned, the Voi equivalent of unease. They did not adapt, Keithivori said. Adaptation implies reluctance, implies resistance. The records show no resistance response. Colonists reported that the experience was, and I translate directly from recovered communications, interesting. He said the word like it tasted wrong. Interesting, he said again. A 90-month resource deprivation event that should have resulted in species termination. And they found it interesting. Dr. Owen Farr won the cooking competition, I said. Everyone looked at me. Month 8, I said. He made a casserole out of synthetic binding material and hydration gel. It was not good by most standards, but it was technically edible, and he documented the recipe. It was later published in an emergency nutrition journal. It has been cited 6 times. Keith made the unease sound again. Low at this time, we moved to the second incident, Stanley Research Station 9 in the Theta Corridor. A human science outpost attached to in the far reaches of the known galaxy, beyond the mapped stars and charted systems, there existed a rule so ancient that no one remembered when it was first spoken. A rule that was not written in law, but carved into fear itself. Never go near Earth. It was not a suggestion. It was not a warning. It was absolute. For over 20,000 years, the planet known as Earth had been marked in every galactic archive as a forbidden world. Its coordinates were flagged, its system avoided, its name spoken only in hushed tones, entire trade routes bent around it. Exploration. Vessels shut down their engines before entering its sector. Even the most aggressive empires, those who had conquered hundreds of worlds, never dared cross into its orbit. To the younger civilizations, this made no sense. Earth did not appear powerful. It had no visible planetary shields. No massive orbital defense grids, no fleets patrolling its skies. In fact, compared to the advanced civilizations of the galaxy, Earth looked primitive. And yet, no one went there. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, a structure so vast it floated within a hollowed star, thousands of representatives gathered. Beings of light, creatures of crystal, entities made of liquid, gas, and forms beyond comprehension. At the center of it all stood the Archive Keeper, an ancient entity known as Zila. Zila was older than most civilizations present. Its existence stretched back to the earliest days of recorded galactic history. It did not rule. It did not command, it remembered, and in a galaxy where knowledge was power, memory was everything. A new voice broke the silence. It came from a species, newly admitted into the council. Young, ambitious, unafraid. Why is Earth restricted? The question echoed across the chamber. Thousands of eyes turned, some filled with annoyance, others with something far deeper. Fear. The representative continued, emboldened by the silence. We have scanned the system. There is nothing remarkable, no advanced weapons, no galactic-level technology. By all measurable standards, they are inferior. A pause. Yet you forbade us from making contact, from exploring, from claiming. The word claiming sent a ripple through the chamber. Several older species shifted uneasily. Zila moved. Its form shimmered as it stepped forward, light bending around it like reality itself was hesitant to touch it. You see weakness, Zila said, its voice calm but heavy. That is your first mistake. The young representative tilted its head. Then explain. For a long moment, Zila said nothing, as if deciding whether the truth itself was worth revealing. Then finally, it began. Humans are not the strongest species in the galaxy. A soft murmur spread. They are not the fastest thought. They are not the most intelligent. They are not the most advanced. The chamber relaxed slightly. This aligned with what everyone believed. Then Zila's tone changed. But they are the most dangerous. Silence returned. Heavier this time. The young representative let out a faint sound, something close to amusement. Dangerous, it said. We have conquered species that manipulate stars. We have defeated empires that bend time itself. And you claim that a primitive world is more dangerous than them. Zila's form pulsed once. They do not follow the rules. Confusion spread. Rules? The representative asked. The rules of survival, Zila replied. The rules that every other species obeys without question. Zila turned, and the chamber darkened as a projection filled the space. A small blue planet appeared. Earth. Every species evolves within limits, Zila continued. When faced with overwhelming odds, they retreat. When faced with extinction, they surrender. When faced with superior force, they accept their place. A pause. Humans do not. The projection changed. Images flashed rapidly. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, mass extinctions, and yet, they survived all of it. Another chef. Wars. Primitive. Weapons evolving into devastating ones. They fight each other more than they fight any external threat. A murmur of confusion. Then they should destroy themselves. Someone whispered. Zilla responded instantly. They should have. The projection zoomed in. Cities destroyed, then rebuilt. Civilizations collapsing. Then rising again. Stronger, they learn from destruction, Zilla said. They evolved through conflict. The chamber was silent. Now, listening. And when an external threat appears, the projection stopped, froze. Earth, seen from orbit. Peaceful. Quiet. Ziller's voice dropped. They unite. A chill moved through the chamber. Individually, humans are fragile, Zilla continued. They fear, they doubt, they bray. Another pause. But together, the image shattered into a new one. A fleet. Not the most advanced. Not the most powerful, but relentless. They become something else. The young representative frowned. Every species claims unity in times of war. Zilla turned, slowly. No. A long silence. Not like this. The chamber lights dimmed further. Would you like to see what happened? The last time someone ignored the rule, no one answered. They didn't need to. Zilla began anyway. 10,000 years ago, an empire thought exactly as you do. The projection changed again. A massive fleet appeared sleek. Powerful, unstoppable. The Varric's dominion. They saw Earth as an opportunity, a pause. A weak world, rich in resources, easy to claim. Zilla's voice grew colder. So, they invaded.